there also isn't a realization that there are, let's say, 20 other people who want to solve that problem and perhaps are doing it in a different way. So the question becomes not that you're excited that you want to invest in a company solving that problem, but is that company the one? This is Venture Out Loud, where we have candid conversations on running a venture capital firm, as well as investing in founders, planning for profits around a purpose, and making a positive impact through entrepreneurship. I'm Navin Goyal, your host and the CEO of Loud Capital here in Columbus, Ohio. Today's episode is on what we have learned as investors. Some of the things that I wish we had heard before growing up on podcasts, on stations, on Netflix, all these things is learning about mistakes that investors made. We see failed companies, we see failed pathways, but a lot of people don't dissect what could have been there, what could have been done, what maybe could not have been done, but perhaps this is what we learned for the next one. These are things we want to discuss today. I have my man, Ryan Retcher from Loud Capital with me today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
So we're just going to get right into it. Let's try to figure out how many things we can fit in this episode on what we have learned as investors. So I'm going to just throw it right at you, Ryan. You said your first investment, or at least as an investor, was back in what, 2007?
Yeah, 2007. I was working at a large bank at the time, and I was in the business banking division and was used to working on the back end of that. So a lot of product, a lot of training, credit training, sales training, stuff like that. And so I had experience in looking at businesses from this banking lens. In 2007, the Great Recession was happening. It had just started and everything was just going crazy. And no one I knew what to do. This experience, especially at the bank, it was just chaos. Sure. It was controlled chaos. And, the bank had a great leader and pushed through. But as it pertained to doing deals with clients, the spigot was just turned off for businesses. So it created this environment. This was globally, right? So you had a lot of entrepreneurs, you had a lot of businesses that were traditionally used to being able to leverage cheap bank financing or relatively cheap bank financing to address the needs of their business and growing their business. And all of a sudden, that spigot was turned off. So they started looking at other sources. They started looking to angel investors, to friends and family, to venture capital firms, to private equity firms that were
filling in the gaps, maybe.
Fill in the gap.
Yep.
Exactly. And so just saw that opportunity, saw a couple of deals that I had no experience as an investor in that early stage environment. I didn't know how to evaluate, but I trusted some other people that said, "Hey, you should look at this deal or these deals," and kind of dove into it. And I was looking at it through my banker lens, through that credit training that I had received and was actually doling out in certain settings, and it was very quantitative. And I had this ability to look at a deal through this very quantitative lens and look at things. And one of my biggest mistakes at that really, really early age was something that I wouldn't even realize what my mistakes were until much later, maybe, even 8 years later, when I had been an entrepreneur. I had been working to build a company. I had been also investing in different companies. And I was able to finally put in context what I was really missing as an investor.
And real quick, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. When you say quantitative, you had the lens of a quantitative aspect. Can you just dig deeper into that for people who don't know what that means in the investment world?
Yeah, so quantitative from a banking perspective, you're looking at leverage, you're looking at profitability equations or ratios of a company.
So numbers, we're looking at numbers.
We're looking at numbers, and you're looking at the hard data of resumes. What have these people done? What have their careers looked like? And you kind of look at that and say, well, this is what they've accomplished. So they're either likely or unlikely to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish with, at the bank, it was a loan. And so you run all of that. And there was some qualitative aspects. And by qualitative, I mean, you look at really their not emotional intelligence, their ability to connect with people, attract talent.
Yep.
They have a lot of talent, again,
personality traits, network, maybe motivations, life factors, community factors, things that are not numbers. And wouldn't you say, knowing what we know now, we always talk about kind of the banking world, which plays a very important piece in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but it is very number driven, rightfully so. But I think as long as we acknowledge that the banking world plays a part with regards to numbers, not the whole pie, that's where I think maybe some of your experience in the entrepreneurial world is pointing to, that you learned other pieces of the pie. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what are some of those pieces that you would say, okay, hey, I'm a banker listening to this right now, and yes, I know numbers. In fact, I'm really good at looking at investments and seeing if they're great or not great. How would you educate that person knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I think you have to take into effect the difference in experience. So when you look at, and this is, again, the qualitative side, where you look at an individual or leaders, co-founders, whomever you're really investing in, you have to look at it as that I'm investing in this individual, I'm investing in this team of people. And instead of just looking at their LinkedIn profile, their resume, their CV, and saying, okay, they have all of these experiences, you have to put that in context of what they're actually trying to do. And so even if they were successful at the highest levels in a corporate environment, that doesn't necessarily translate into likelihood of success at an entrepreneurial level.
Right.
The resources are completely different. The scope of support that they have, it tends to be completely different. The amount of times that you hit a wall and have to deal with that as an individual, if you're not used to failing, if you're not used to hitting a roadblock and having to get your hands dirty and work around that, it's a major, major adjustment when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to do that within your own business and try to fix something. And this is, again, part of my experience was I came from that corporate world. I left the bank. I was starting a company, and there was all sorts of factors and everything. But at the end of the day, I look back and I had such a high level of confidence in my ability to do anything. And it was unfounded confidence because I had never really failed before. I'd never been put in a position to fail because I had such a massive, high budget support system around me. And no one was really taking risks in that environment, true risks that you have to take in order to be successful in a company, in building a company from scratch. And so, like I said, I didn't really start to realize that from a qualitative standpoint, how to assess looking at an opportunity within its entrepreneurs. And sometimes you have to shut off the evaluation of the quantitative in their LinkedIn, on their CV, because that might not matter in the context of what they need to build that business.
And I would say, numbers obviously don't lie. And so when you're looking at a sheet and you see numbers and you look at, let's say, growth over this past year, obviously that doesn't lie. The problem is there is more to it behind the numbers. Why did the numbers drag a little bit in this quarter? And if you just go only by the numbers and don't dig enough to the story, you don't realize that there was other factors, like you're saying. And so one example is, hey, the team was really optimized. People who were hired, money was used to hire great people. We got more customers, but just like we seen in the pandemic, there were supply chain issues and we couldn't get our product. And so even though we had our customers who wanted our product, we couldn't sell our product because we didn't even have the right pieces to provide our product to our customer. And so if you just look at that quarter where that happened and our numbers dragged, you could say, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And so without really addressing the story behind it and all the other factors, you as a numbers person might just make a judgment and say, this company's not growing and we're going in a different way here. And what I've learned over the years is decisions are made based on those numbers.
Yeah.
And unless you know what questions to ask, unless you have experience building a company and knowing that there are so many factors that could contribute to those numbers, positive or negative, then you really won't get the full picture. And so that company actually might be very, very, very healthy. And that supply chain actually affected many companies in that same industry. And you might be sitting on this gem that's about to explode in a really positive manner. And that's what we've seen, right?
Yep.
We've seen people misjudge or misplace blame or reasoning on certain numbers. So that's a great aspect. And I want to add one thing that I've learned over the years, where I still hear first-time investors, or let's say people that are new to a certain industry, they get very excited when they see an opportunity, a private opportunity in front of them that's going to solve this problem. They know the problem exists, and they meet an entrepreneur, or meet at least a group of people solving this problem. They go, yes, this makes sense. This problem needs to be solved. I've never seen it done this way. I want to invest in this opportunity because this is going to go somewhere. And a couple things. Number one, there's nothing wrong to be enthusiastic or excited. That's literally how I start a lot of my engagements with people, whether that's right or wrong. There also isn't a realization that there are, let's say, 20 other people who want to solve that problem and perhaps are doing it in a different way. So the question becomes not that you're excited that you want to invest in a company solving that problem, but is that company the one?
Yeah.
Or is that company the handful that's going to go into a successful endeavor that makes you money, makes you happy for helping solve that problem, and so forth? And I will tell you, there are so many great entrepreneurs out there overlapping things. And so part of diligence, or doing your research or doing your homework, is ensuring that you know about at least a lot of these other people. They might be too small or in a different geographical area where you don't have access to, but it behooves you not to do some research or diligence. So how would you suggest, I'm an individual investor, I see a really great opportunity to problem solve here, and I want to really invest in it. What would your experience tell that person?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm going to go back to something you said a minute ago, in that you've got an entrepreneur, they're solving a problem. There's a defined need that this problem, that this solution is solving, but how incremental is that solution to that problem? Is it moving the needle a little bit, or is it totally changing the game and forward looking at what this problem will be 5 years from now? And oftentimes, in my experience, I've seen that, okay, they're moving a little bit. There is some pain there that they're solving, but if it's that small of a gap between the problem and the solution, then there's probably a lot of people working on that because it's obvious. And if it's an obvious solution, oftentimes you're then going to rely on your ability to mass market sell that to your addressable market. And what I tend to look at is, how is this forward looking? Okay, it's not just the problem that's today. It's anticipating what the problem is going to be years out that other people are unlikely to be thinking about. And so that's step one. But, to directly answer your question, these days, if you really just Google it, there's a lot of people that, based on entrepreneurship today, where awareness of entrepreneurship and all the pitch competitions and things like that, there's probably information out there about a lot of companies, because companies tend to be very public about what they're doing. They just might not be in your market. So, okay, if we're here in Columbus and this is an issue that is happening in Indianapolis or Kansas City or Chicago or LA, okay, maybe I should start looking around at those opportunities. And if you're not willing to put in that work to really dig in, then you probably shouldn't be investing in that space. And that's, again, from my experience, sometimes it's not necessarily laziness, but a lack of resources as an investor to really dig in and do that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Another thing I wanted to talk about is validation. Getting a first customer or getting a few customers that will buy into your product or the problem you're trying to solve. So, there's been early stage companies that I've personally invested in and we've invested in as a firm where there has been validation. It's not just the team of people saying, this is what we want to do for the market, but the market has responded. There's actually businesses that say, absolutely. And then there's businesses that become repeat customers. And then there's other businesses that hop on. So tell me a little bit about validation. If I'm an investor and I say, hey, have you shown this to people? Have they bought your product? Or are there anything, other things you can add to that? Or maybe not, right? Maybe I answered what I was trying to ask, which is, do you have customers?
Yeah.
And number one, it'd be great if they did, but the response to it is actually very important too.
Yes. And that's a good point. That's why I hesitated to respond, because frankly, at this point in as an investor, I'm 13 years in, but we've been doing this collectively for 6 years now.
Yep.
And I think the number one thing, if we go back and look at every single deal we've ever looked at, especially early on, that was the one thing I think we can regret, is looking back and saying, okay, we had to have believed, because we invested, that individual or those teams would be able to sell what they were selling to us to invest in. But they hadn't sold it yet.
Yep.
They hadn't sold it to anyone.
Yep.
They didn't test. I think at this point, when we're evaluating an investment, I can't remember anything we've invested in recently where that wasn't a criteria to even consider looking at a deal. Have you gotten at least a prototype that you have not even necessarily sold to someone, but someone that is an active customer that's using that product, that is giving you positive feedback? And if they're getting enough positive feedback to say, hey, if you do this, this, and this and improve it, we'll actually buy this. That's the minimum that I need to see as an investor to consider investing in a company. And that takes work. That takes bootstrapping. That takes, maybe friends and family helping these entrepreneurs out. But that is skin in the game. That effort, going out and building something that has your first customer, paid or not, that is giving you positive feedback that you can leverage to come to an investor and say, hey, I've got something here. Let me show you. Let me show you what my customers are saying. I just need some capital to, make these improvements based on that feedback, scale it up. We're listening at that point.
Yeah. No, I like that. And you're totally right. The last few years, especially, I think we've been very honed in on that and focused, because early on it was that excitement and we didn't ask those deep questions. It seems deep sometimes. Right now it seems, standard, but interesting enough, do you know where the word angel investor comes from?
I don't actually.
It's basically started from, angelic. It's, these people that would come out and and save, or I should say, put this blessing on this company of like, here you go, here's the money. And so I bring that up because I want everyone to know that as an investor, you do not have an obligation to do that. Even if you want to help entrepreneurs in certain ways, there are things you should ask and you should be able to get answers to and be able to see some kind of progress if that's what you demand. And that's all I'm trying to encourage on this podcast episode right now is just to make sure you arm yourself with as much information and have questions to ask. And if you can't ask those, have other people reach out to other people, try to get that knowledge or try to get that local experienced investor to help you out. You don't have to be the angel to rescue a company because that is your money that you're risking, right? And I want to encourage entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and the tough journey they go through. And I want more people to pay attention and support them along their way. But the last thing I want is for someone to invest their money so early without asking the right questions, without asking the right people, that it doesn't do either party any good.
Yeah. And that's a great point, Navin. So many times I think investors come in and you develop this personal connection, or you feel like this personal connection with whomever's asking you for money, that entrepreneur, and they've got this passion and you just want to help them. But sometimes you're not actually helping them if you don't ask the hard questions and you're not demanding. And I say that word demanding with a sense of reverence of that process, that they ask some of these things of themselves first. Because again, in our experience, we've seen so many, I think, unnecessary ultimate failures, not incremental failures that you want to see, but the ultimate failures, because some of these harder questions just weren't asked during that investment process. And before the expectations of performance or lack of expectations set were actually set in motion by writing that check. And so you become more angelic, I think, in making sure that you're not just saving them. It's not that view, I'm saving you by giving you money. Yep. It's I'm saving you by asking you these tough questions to make sure you're in a position to thrive, as opposed to, I'm going to give you this money. Now you're going to feel the weight of that. And then they're in a position to drown.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And you know what? We're actually going to wrap this episode up. This is about having candid conversations about investment experiences and learnings that we have had. And, starting out as angel investors and now investing on behalf of a firm and funds and our fiduciary duty to many investors, we just want to continue educating about this process. So I want to thank Ryan for being here today with me to really discuss this specific topic that we can probably continue talking about throughout our future episodes. But thank you all for being here today, and we look forward to the next time we get together.